who does she think she is? There are many parts of Nigeria, if somebody says, I want to become a governor, you may actually qualify. You may have gone to Oxford, you may have gone to Harvard, you may have gone to Princeton. But somebody might say to you, you are a Muslim, how can you aspire to govern us? You might also be equally pretty well qualified. You want to contest election somewhere, they tell you, how can you govern over us when you are not a Muslim? There are other parts of Nigeria, and this is right across the country, where you may be righteous, you may be good. The country continues to say, we want God-fearing people. But whether you relocate to the church or the mosque and make it your house, if you step up to be elected in Nigeria and you don't have the resources, nobody is going to vote for you because you are a holy man or a holy woman. But it is important that we continue with the conversation by seeking God-fearing people to govern us. But the critical question I'm asking is that at the heart of the management of anger and frustration is the implementation, the need for the implementation of the constitutional principles of inclusion, which in the case of our constitution are found in chapter 2. Largely because chapter 2 captures almost the essence of why governments exist. And that essence is not an essence you can fault as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a woman. Yet, the question is, why is it that these rights are not being put in place? And of course, as you know, a human right is not an aspiration. I can aspire to earn a private jet, and I'm not very happy to hear the Sultan condemn the idea of private jet. You should wait until I have my own first, and then we can decide to condemn the ownership of private jet. I've been trying to convince the Sultan to have a private jet so that at least as neighbors, if I have to travel in an emergency, I will borrow his own. But he keeps insisting I should have mine first before he gets his own. But an aspiration is not a human right. I could aspire to be a governor, but being a governor is not a human right. But the quality of life I live as a citizen of Nigeria, my right to security, my right to safety, my right to dignity, all these are human rights. So the question then is, when you ask, why are people angry? Professor Ben has indicated there is what in the political science of post-colonial state they refer to as the revolution of rising expectations. Namely, that people have high expectations about who they are. And these are realities in our human life. You marry a woman from the village, she gets into primary school, then you let her go to college of education. When she comes back, she will appreciate the fact that her value has changed. And the things she used to do, the things you used to do, you probably will no longer get away with them. And so the most important thing is for us to appreciate the fact that we need to create social conditions around which our common humanity can be celebrated and people can thrive as human beings and citizens of this great country. Now, of course, one of the mitigating factors against frustration and anger is a need to measure contentment. But contentment is an intangible entity. You can't measure it. How do you measure contentment? Tolstoy told a story, and I've written about this. And you can Google the story. And it's called, How Much Land Does a Man Need? And it tells a very simple but very graphic story about a community where, the people were considered to be foolish because they always spend their time drinking and their land was just there. Anybody who wanted land could come and take as much as he wanted. And so this man got to know about it and went there to get land. And he remembered to buy a few drinks. And the people say, look, the land is as vast as your eyes can see. We only have one condition. We don't allocate land. If you start walking, whatever distance you cover, the land belongs to you. The only thing, the condition we set is that when you start walking, you must come back before 6 p.m. And so this man got there and started working with his secretary, and the secretary was recording, and they kept walking and walking and walking. Then it was 4, then 5, then it was going to 6, and he saw some nice piece of land somewhere and rushed. But by the time they took record, it was getting to 6. Then he looked, and the people were still drinking. And he started trying to rush to catch up with them before 6 p.m. He stumbled, fell, and broke his head. Naturally, he died. His secretary found his body too heavy for him to carry down the hill. So the secretary simply measured him 6 feet, dug a hole of 6 feet, and buried him. Question is, how much land does a man need? It's only 6 feet. And there must be something psychologically wrong with us in Nigeria. That when you find, there must be something wrong with us as Nigerians. And there's what psychologists call ego compensation. You know, that you think that, you know, in those days when we were young, and the reason why I came here is because I'm over 60, so I had to come and be with my younger brother. But in those days, you see these young boys carrying key holder. The key holder is marked Mercedes-Benz. Meanwhile, the man doesn't have, but he's holding it so that the girls can see and think he has a Mercedes-Benz. And there must be something congenitally wrong with us as Nigerians. That one person has more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses or 10 houses in the same 923,000 square kilometers of Nigeria. Not to talk of New York, not to talk of Paris, not to talk of Dubai, not to talk of every... The critical question, how much land does a man require? And I think that the reason why Nigerians have earned the right to be angry is that there are too many things we know now that we didn't know before. We weren't as educated as we are now. We didn't know about the possibilities that now exist. When I was growing up in my little village, as a little boy, I lived with my grandmother. Whenever she was angry, she would tell you, if you feel so angry, trek to Kafanchan. That was her way of expressing anger. And Kafanchan, I had never been to Kafanchan as a child, but we always heard that Kafanchan is where all the trains in the world are meeting. We didn't know where the world was. I'd never been to Kaduna. But now from my village to Kafanchan is 40 minutes drive. But at that time, for my grandmother and I, it was literally the end of the world. We didn't know how much money we were getting from oil. We didn't know how much resources we had. Now that we realize how much we have, of course we've earned a right to be angry. We've earned a right to be angry about how we are governed. We've earned a right to be angry about why so much is being spent on elections. We've got a right to be angry about how so much is being spent on processes as opposed to outcomes. We've got a right to be angry about how a country so richly endowed can have so many young people outside the loop of power. And I think, therefore, that the anger, the kind of anger we're talking about, is an anger that arises from a feeling of righteous indignation, an appreciation of the fact that this is not what God ordained for us. This afternoon in Port Harcourt, I was talking to young people, and I said, look, I don't know whether you listen to this little girl, Malala. 16-year-old girl standing before the United Nations and addressing the world. A victim, she's become a metaphor for expressing defiance. Many of us find difficulties in talking or speaking out, largely because we are repositioning ourselves, hoping that opportunities will come to us. But in speaking, Malala says, I am a Muslim, but I derive my inspiration from the Holy Quran. I derive my inspiration from the Holy Bible. I derive my inspiration from Buddhism. I derive my inspiration from Martin Luther King. I derive my inspiration from... I mean, she's talking... This is a little 16-year-old kid who only became 17 recently. And yet there are many of us here who say, we think that going to Sokoto or going to Katsina or going to Kebbi or traveling outside our immediate environment. I meet a lot of my friends who say to me, Bishop, you know, although I would have liked to visit you because I would just like to see the Sultan. But this Boko Haram, this is the same country we are living in. And I'm asking, how is it that Nigerians who are educated, who are reading the newspapers, are unaware of the fact that, on balance, out of the 36 states of Nigeria, plus the FCT, there is no part of this country that is as peaceful as Sokoto. And I say, how is it that people don't recognize this? But this is what prejudice does to us. And as the